The final steam train went into oblivion over 30 years ago, on Monday the 6th of November 1967. In charge was one of the impressive Class 9 freight engines, 92203, which was making the last trip through the heart of the Wirral from Bidston Docks, Birkenhead to the John Summers Steelworks at Shotton, thus ending nearly 130 years of steam traction on the Wirral. Described as situated twixt the Mersey and the Dee, the Wirral's very first railway had started near Bidston Dock on the south side of the old Wallasey Pool, long before its conversion into the Birkenhead dock system. With the tracks leading to the iron ore terminal on the right, a Wrexham rattler approached the signals guarding the S-bend sweeping across Bidston Moss. Having received all clear, the driver opened the regulator. Steam still dominated most freight in the Bidston area. This Ginty, for example, would have served the yards on the New Brighton line. It would also have shunted the surviving facilities on the Seacombe branch, which were closed months later in December 1960, although the tracks as far as Liscard and Pulton remained for storage until June 1963. As dock traffic dwindled, Bidston, shed code 6F, had closed in February 1963. Its allocation, including 9 Fs for the Shotton ore trains, being transferred to Mollington Street. However, passenger steam on the Mid-Wirral line was not quite a spent force. A couple of times a year, usually on bank holiday Mondays, certain trains were re-timed, hauled by steam, and operated between either Chester Northgate or Wrexham and New Brighton. The Mid-Wirral line was still popular, and the 4-car DMUs could not have handled the expected crowds. Departing from Bidston, inbound trains still took the curves on the west side of the Bidston Triangle, but instead of turning east at Seacombe Junction, they headed across the sand dunes towards New Brighton. Using a rake of somewhat musty spare coaches, Pannier 4683 of Crossnewid arrived at the resort on the 7th of June 1965. These bank holiday trains, which were direct descendants of the old popular Seacombe-Caergwrle Castle excursions, were used both by people escaping into North Wales as well as by those from Wales heading for the coast. 4683 of Collett design dated from the mid-1930s. And these were probably the last ex-Great Western locos to operate scheduled passenger trains on the Wirral. The 060 propels the coaches forward in order to reverse them into the station yard. A through trip from New Brighton to Wrexham, stopping at all 18 intermediary stations, took approximately 90 minutes. Arriving at Upton. (4683) tackled the steep ascent up Storeton Bank. A somewhat rusty 460 pulled into Neston North in 1966. Having tackled the strenuous climb up from Bidston, the 460 stopped for water before continuing on to Wrexham. Despite their undoubted charm and the sparsity of operation, these unusual steam turns only attracted the more determined enthusiasts. Crossing the Dee navigation on the Hawarden Bridge. These delightful excursions, almost relics of a bygone age, last operated in 1966. Fully laden ore train was allowed 48 minutes for the 12.5-mile trip, As they were not equipped with continuous braking and were only loose coupled, the maximum permitted speed was 35 miles an hour, the locos working chimney leading on the ascent from Bidston D Junction. For the most part, the grades were between 1 in 100 and 1 in 120, and it was for this reason that severe restrictions were placed upon load capacity. For example, this loco, with its tractive effort of 40,000 pounds, would be pulling 11 loaded hoppers with a combined weight of just under 1,000 tons. Ever since its opening, the Mid-Wirral had always had a high percentage of mineral traffic, originally coal from the Welsh mines going to the docks. At the busiest times, the trains would be shuttling up and down approximately every 2 hours. But if there were no boats, there would be no trains. The drivers and firemen found the big 210Os capable and reliable. They rarely encountered any major problems. For the men, the iron ore trains were called the pickle, after one of the processing procedures undertaken at Summers. With the wind in the right direction, the rasping bark from the exhaust could clearly be heard as far away as New Brighton or Moreton. The steepest section of all was 1 in 75. On the return to Bidston, when the locos always worked tender first, a maximum of 33 empty hoppers was permitted, equal to 3 train loads. This meant some spaceships like 92111 would occasionally follow with just 3 brake vans. The first train of the day always returned light engine. Sometimes the second and third would do the same. For the men, the object was to earn bonuses by getting back to Bidston as fast as possible. There was no hanging about. At Leighton, a load of empties clatters back down to the dock. A final view taken at the summit of the long ascent up from Bidston. The last of the pickles would run on Monday the 6th of November, just 2 days after Woodside Station suffered the ultimate indignity. Now the steam too was going. At 11:15 a.m. on Monday the 6th of November, the final summer's ore train left Bidston to blast its way through the Wirral countryside. At the regulator was Sir John Summers. Beautifully cleaned and polished, 92203, destined for eventual preservation, was in charge of this memorable last trip. Nearing the end of its historic journey, the gleaming loco drifted through Burton Point. Even the wagons looked cleaner than usual. On arrival at Shockwick sidings, where a stiff breeze was blowing, the 210O, still displaying its special headboard, was uncoupled, leaving the wagons to be moved on by one of Summers' fleet of diesel locos. Normally locos had returned bunker first, but on this occasion 92203 was to be turned for her final departure from the Wirral. Smoke blowing defiantly, she brought to an end some 12 years of 9F haulage on the pickle. Just to prove miracles do happen, over a weekend in October in 1997, 92203, the very loco which had performed the funeral rites 30 years ago, travelled by road from the West Somerset Railway to Shotwick sidings, specially to commemorate the passing of the steam-hauled iron ore trains. On the Saturday, the loco had been in steam and working on the internal steelworks system, but the event was not open to the public. On the Sunday, however, the public were allowed access. Unfortunately, due to a derailment the previous day when the leading coupled wheels rode up on the nose of a joint, Black Prince was restricted to a very short run. But steam had returned to Shotton in a very imaginative way. 92203 has since departed for the Llangollen Railway. Her all-too-short weekend visit conjured up half-forgotten, almost ghost-like memories of the majestic 210Os echoing across the Wirral countryside.